So, just like the sort of brief overview, Opus 40 was a monument that was created by the artist Harvey Fite, who was a skilled stone sculptor who founded the art department at Bard. And he was kind of one of the most, an autodidact, really fascinated by a lot of different things. And he essentially as his home, and then extended when he married Barbara Richards later, and then made this a family estate. But in the early years, he was really living with the kind of bare minimum amenities, no running water or electricity, and he was essentially here sculpting day after day. And this is really the work of one man. I'm sure that there were times when he brought some of his students here from Bard that moved stones around, but this entire work is this incredible pioneer story of one man moving an enormous quantity of stone.
Is the left-hand part the original?
The left-hand part, yes, is the original. So the Fite House was part of a sort of separate parcel of the property that was owned by the family and acquired by the foundation about a year and a half ago now, which is this really exciting moment for the organization, that the property, the historic part of the property, is now becoming consolidated, and later with, I think, Alan in the lead. Where's Alan?
Right here.
That will embark on a preservation of the historic part of the house as well. When he bought the property, he bought it with this idea that the stone and the copious wood on the site would be fodder for his sculpting, and also that he could use the site as a way to exhibit his stone sculptures. So the early iterations were basically shaping these into pedestals, really, for the exhibition of his stone sculptures, which later he removed because he realized that, in fact, it was no longer like a proper gallery space, that the monument itself had become its own work of art. Maybe John, you want to start?
Yeah, just to understand, when you ask what is it, Harvey originally built it as a platform to display his rather large stonework sculptures, some of which you can see up on the lawns in places. We can point them out. The biggest one at the far end there, Quarry Family, at 4 tons, and another at near 3 tons. He actually put the raw rock out on the rondelles he had built and carved it in place. And we have excellent archives at opus40.org to look at pictures of all that. In 1964, he erected that 9-ton monolith there with the intention of carving it in place, as he had done with several other bigger pieces, to actually to replace just a 3/4 ton flame, it's called, statue in there, which he had carved inside his studio here. He notched it up there to wrap it in change, to hoist it up there with the intention of carving it as in place, but in process had the recognition to appreciate what everybody since appreciates, and decided at that point to clear off the other statuary, and it became a coherent sculpture standalone. That was in 1964, 25 years into working it. That's when he named it Opus 40, estimating it would take him another 15 years of work to complete.
So what's under the hump? Is it unexcavated stone, or did he fill?
It's the big, incredible mystery.
Yeah, it's all the overburden and disused stone from the quarry.
Okay.
So usually in a quarrying, in a 1800s quarry operation, early 1900s, you have derricks, which are simple cranes made with logs, cables, and winches. And anything that's not production material gets swung and dumped behind you. So that includes in this quarry, about the top 8 feet or so of stone, which we'll see in other places is not good quality stone. That gets dumped behind you so that they can get down any broken pieces, the soil that was on top of the bedrock that they're quarrying, tree stumps, it all just goes in a heap behind you.
And there's no sort of photographic documentation?
There is.
What's underneath there?
Actually,
There's
if we can start moving and seeing more of the movement, and we have time towards the end, I'd like to take you up to an area where you'll see one of the quarry sites that was probably at a stage similar to what Harvey found in the original monument site. And then we can kind of get an idea. But there's a lot of historic documentation that John mentioned, that photos of the early working stage where we see like large piles of totally disorganized. In the interest of seeing as much as possible, I'm just going to say very briefly, looking here to your right, John Cedarquist has pointed out to me that the early walls, you see very coarse stone masonry, and then the later walls, and then the rondel that you see in the background is more of his later work, where you find really very thin, tighter packed work. His early work, often he would come back to it later in his career and or to repiece, repair stuff, because he was learning as he went.
Look how big this is. I mean, look how perfect those are. It's like a whole big platform right here. That's nuts.
weathering process is deteriorating. So when he was building with those thin stones, they were a lot stronger than they are now.
Yeah.
And because of the natural weathering process of the bluestone, and that he was starting with stone largely that the quarrymen had already rejected as being an inferior quality, now 150 years after it was quarried, it's very weak material. And you can tell when you get into shaping it, the stone, if you crack it open and it's a nice dark blue, it's a sound. It's, you can also just hit it with a hammer and hear it. But a lot of, if 100 years ago that may have been a decent stone, but the bluestone always weathers in from the outside. If you're starting with a very thin stone, it's weathering from the top and bottom. And at this point in time, if we wanted more thin stone, probably we would have to quarry it. We can't find it in the quarry piles. In terms of the stone we reused, it was all from the property, with the one exception of the bridge stone that we had to replace, which we found a reclaimed piece of stone.
So you mean the new stuff you were introducing was all?
It's all from the property, and we can look at where we were getting it from the property.
And he didn't incorporate any weeps, correct?
No, and with dry stone, there's typically no reason to.
Yeah, I mean the whole wall's a weep.
Yeah, the whole wall is a weep. What you're walking on here, we excavated down about 18 and rebuilt back up.
gap in through here. And there's some stuff in there to make it stable.
So this, I'll wait for everybody to come in. This was the wall that we've, in the restoration part, we call the Amphitheater wall, because this area is kind of broadly called the Amphitheater. And this is the wall that I mentioned was leaning outward quite alarmingly, to the point that it had pulled away from the quarry face at the top about more than a foot. And it was constructed with this lower tier and then the back tall wall. What was under the tall wall, starting at this level, was soil. And it was soil here down to the lead, down to the quarry floor, which we're standing on. So it was just that bottom 2 feet. And that's what was allowing it to tilt outward. One of the things that you'll notice about the way we're constructing is that every so often you'll see there's a bigger stone. There's one, there's one, there's one. Those stones are the through stones, and they go back about 5 to 6 feet. And they're on a grid, so every 3 feet along there's one, and every 2 feet high. And that ties the structure back. One of the other big things that you'll notice that's different, and you can compare to the wall right behind you, the length of the faces of the stone, the face being the part that you're looking at, these are all comparatively shorter. And that's because every stone is set so the length of the stone goes back into the wall. And that is standard best practice for dry stone walling. Turning it the other way would be called trace walling, where you're running, typically what people would do is run a smooth flat face, the outside, often fairly narrow stones. And that's a lot of how this was built. So he was naturally using the smooth faces of the stone, but many of those stones are very narrow. What we had to do as a result is a lot of these are stones that we broke the face on. So in other words, we made our own faces for the stone, so it's a slightly rougher texture. Now this has been up now 3 years, and the weathering is actually bringing it closer to the old stone. When we first put it up, the color was quite different, and it looked a lot different. Now after 3 years, just because the color is weathering and mellowing, it's starting to look a lot better. I mentioned that you could tell the quality of the stone when you broke it. You can see this color blue on some of these stones that we had a broken face. That's good, that's good quality stone. But even here, you'll see like a couple places where we put a thin stone in, it's cracked, and it's cracked. So the weight coming down it is hard on these stones. There's another one there. But you'll notice that throughout the whole stack, it's always like one stone spanning a joint. So it's one stone on two stones, two on one, all the way down through. There's no big vertical seams going up through the wall. And that distributes the force so that as there's any movement, it's all tied together. Kind of look like piles of stone like this. And if you're building up a wall, you're basically picking through and sliding the stones down that you want to build with and creating your wall face at the bottom. That's the easiest way to build. The material's right at hand and you're always shifting it downhill. And there appears to be, he was, and especially in the later stages of work, he was really actively seeking out the thinner, flatter stones. If you look along this, I think it's up there a bit, there's one spot where he has a stone that's a little bit larger going back lengthwise. But in terms of like the through stones that we mentioned building, we found one in that quarry wall section, and we put in probably 18.
If I could just point something out that is, to me at least, of great interest, is that you will see ripples on the ground here at this level that the quarrymen stopped going any deeper. And these are ripples from, one could say, ocean bed or river bed. It's actually both. This was the Catskill Delta, where mountains that are no longer in existence, the Berkshires are all that remain after multiple ice ages. It flowed this way, and pretty well everything all the way to the Rockies was the interior ocean, back when this whole continent was well south of the global equator. But it's very interesting to me that you can see that, call it seabed or riverbed in here. And in some of the rocks that Harvey used, you can see it there.
So are you coming up to Montreal? The 11th? I'm doing 11 Monday through Sunday. We gotta get to the board meeting. Talk about bylaws. We just deleted. This will be my first. You're free? I'm free. And I'm jumping in. This is the beginning. Yeah, I'm already free. I'm like, how would I figure out how to local conference chair and regular conference chair. I don't know why else it's It's heavy. It's heavy lift.
What's your step, please?
The bylaws and just do the board meeting while they're at their workshop. We're in we're almost no, we're not doing nothing done. We're getting to that.
tiny pieces. There we go. I'm glad I lost some weight. There we go. I can do this. This lovely tree here.
Look here, just to the left of the fair, all the way to the right side of the Ron Valley is the last phase of the work that Brian and his team took on, where, as he mentioned, they've been 18 feet down in the original masonry and a massive amount of that masonry that they had to take out, removing the soil and rebuilding it. So one of the challenges that we discussed earlier is because we know, like, that, you know, the beauty and the flow of this site is so much on the basis of this thin, like diaphanous dimension stone that we know is not great for the masonry. Like, you know, even anywhere that you can see through cracks, some of them planned, some of them just breakage after the fact all through the masonry. But we also know that, you know, that to build it in the best possible way can create an incongruity with Harvey's aesthetic. So, like, there are definitely schools of thought in conservation that say, let's make a big difference between the historic way of working and then a newer way of working and sort of maintain the forms. But, you know, on the board, we're really of the opinion, and also with the family, very much in support of the idea, like, let's build in the best possible way, using all of the methods that Harvey used, plus best practice in dry stone walling, and through stones, and better stone thickness.
It's not about how Harvey placed the stones. It's about the form.
The forms.
And keeping that preserved. But this is a great example of a quarryman's wall.
Yeah.
And for keeping your quarry face open.
So quarry face and then the wall.
The quarry face is the cliff here.
Right.
That's the slag pile.
And then you're building the wall to keep the slag pile
from coming into the quarry face, so you can quarry the next level. And there's a great quarry that's off. It's a bit more of a hike, but
Okay.
it's a smaller quarry. But there's a trench quarry here, and then you can see there's a center point, and then the slag pile is an arc around it.
Oh, okay.
And so center derrick.
Yeah.
They're quarrying. They pick it up and they distribute out all the waste. You know, and it's just dead obvious how they were doing.
How they were building it.
You know, and same thing here. Like, you know, I don't know precisely where the derrick would have been set up in this case, but in that case, you could just see the arc of the derrick.
Had to have been in this area right in here somewhere, right? 'Cause
Well,
the outer wall is often through here.
It was probably
so you just need to be able to
somewhere
rotate
around
it
where that hardwood
right there.
tree.
Yeah.
I mean, no, like farther, like the far one. I mean,
Oh,
you're talking like
further.
60-foot
True.
derrick span.
Okay.
You know, or it could have been many small ones because they would also like leapfrog one.
Yeah,
You know,
makes sense.
And then they also use the aerial cable tramways where you would have
Okay.
you'd put your waste hoisted up and then it would tram out.
Some of the old photographs.
Yeah.
Of the
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
and they would do, you know, a quarry this size would have had
multiple
derricks.
easily.
You know, probably
Okay,
would have
makes
4 or
sense.
5. Harvey had 3 when he was building that. There was a
On the
big
site.
one, and then there was 2 smaller ones, and he moved them too. I mean, and they are movable. They're a pain in the neck to move, but they are
all
quite movable.
tethered, right?
It's all
With-
cable. It's
yeah.
it's basically 2 logs, some hardware, and cables.
Okay. What's that used for?
Yep, that's for, well, it can be for different things. It can be for thrashing wheat through and ripping it through to, it can be for carting wool, but that's too big for carting wool. Since it's next to the rake, I'm thinking it's a farming.
Yeah, farming.
Kind of an interesting mix of
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything.
tools.
And whatever else he's found.
I've never actually been to one. Do you want to try it? Museums like this. With great.
Holy. It's like a Moravian star, right?
Bye.